You're very welcome into the programme. It's Maria in for Damien. A couple of other things that are coming up on the programme this morning. It is just possible, that revenue owes you money. And I'll be finding out how you can go about finding out about that on the programme this morning. I'll also be talking to another group of transition year students for Science Week. This year's theme, of course, as it is for everywhere else, is climate change. And I want to know, what memories do you have of the old Savoy Cinema in Waterford? Because I'm going to be talking to a lovely lady, Maureen Fitzgerald, who ran the old Savoy Theatre with their husband, Richard. And I want to get some memories about that from her. So if you have any memories, I'd love to hear them. You can get in touch with the programme on 083 333 975, or you can give us a call on 051 846 123. And of course you can comment on anything that you fancy as well, that you that's just exercising your brain. We always like to hear from you on that. But first up this morning, it was supposedly all in the bag yesterday, and the 39 million was all sorted for the relocation of Plunkett's train station for the North Quays project. But what has happened in the interim, if anything? We have on the line David Cullinan. You're very welcome to the programme, David.
Good morning, Marie. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, I heard you yesterday, and you were, and it's not like you, to be fair, to not be ambiguous. If it wasn't done and dusted, you're not the type to come on and say this is great news. You'd be you're always a bit cautious, I find. So yesterday there was no ambiguity here. It was done and dusted. Today we're hearing that there was a statement issued from the Minister's office saying that this was a meeting with the local representatives from Waterford to discuss issues facing the city. No decisions were made at the meeting. It was simply a discussion.
Well, first of all, Marie, I can't account for what press statements come from a minister's office, but what I can account for was what information Oireachtas members got from the minister yesterday. I think there might be just some confusion in respect of what exactly was said yesterday, because it isn't their job, obviously, to announce the overall funding for the project and when exactly the minister will announce the funding in terms of how the funding will be provided and what time, because this is a fund that will fund a number of projects from across the state. And Waterford's North Quays project is one of a number of projects which is in the Urban Regeneration and Development Fund pot. So obviously the Minister in due course will announce the funding for each and every project. And I suppose what we're all watching is how much money Waterford will get for this project in the next tranche of funding. Now, that is a matter for the Minister, and that was not communicated to us in terms of when he will formally make that announcement. What he did say to us, and I'm very clear on this, as is John Halligan and Mary Butler, who were at the meeting yesterday, and this was announced by Minister Halligan on your own radio station yesterday, that the bone of contention here and the blockage, if I can put it like that, in terms of the North Quays project was who is going to fund the train station. And just so we're clear, we had a number of meetings as Oireachtas members with different departments. A number of weeks ago we met again as a block with the Department of Transport, and the bone of contention was which department would fund the moving of the train station. And just so your listeners are clear, there's three clear elements of the state ask, if you like, for the North Quays. The pedestrian bridge that will link the North and South Quays, access roads and infrastructural works that have to be done to connect the North Quays with the Ferrybank side with Abbey Park and other associated works as well, and then moving the train station, which is seen as important in terms of having footfall and people coming to the overall development. And that would make sense. I think everybody accepts where the train station is. It's great to get in and out. It would be a huge positive as well, I think, for all sorts of reasons, including traffic management, that it would be landed onto the North Quays. And the Minister was crystal clear that his line department will fund the moving of the train station in the main. It will now come from his department. That was the first time that was communicated to us. He said to us that this was a massive step forward, that he was lobbied on this by the Taoiseach, by local politicians, by ourselves, by the Chamber of Commerce. And I know as well, and I want to acknowledge the work that Paddy Coffey, John Halligan and many people have done on this for a long time. We're all trying to move this issue on. So simply what was communicated to us yesterday was that what was contentious for some time in terms of who would fund moving the train station has now been sorted, and it will be done by the Department of Local Government. What the Minister also said was that there were some elements of those works in terms of some minor transport-related elements of the overall project that would have to be funded by the Department of Transport, and he will formally request from them that they do so. So I would imagine that before he makes a formal announcement on the next stage of funding, and the overall ask is massive in terms of over 100 million, he will want all of the departments lined up on this, and I think that's what the Minister is saying in his press statement. But I can categorically say, and John Halligan has said the same as Mary Butler, that what was communicated to us was that the funding of the train station is now secure and is now with the Department of Local Government. And I think that's massively important and a huge step forward for Waterford, because the big issue here isn't about who announces what and when. It's about Waterford, it's about this project, and it's about the importance of this for the city and for the region. And it will be transformative in terms of what this will mean, because the moving of the train station is actually about integrating public transport in Waterford in a way that we haven't had before. And I think having the train station on the North Quays, with the bus station on the South Quays, with a pedestrian bridge which links the two, with the new retail offering that this will bring, with the hotel that will come, with the office accommodation, I also understand that huge progress has been made by the developers in terms of interest, expressions of interest for the office accommodation, high-end retail that want to come. So, it's the old adage, if you build it, they'll come, seems to be the case. And what we're all trying to do is to get us into a place where there's no blockages, there's no difficulties, whatever challenges are there are overcome. And I think we're very close to that point, Marie, in terms of the Minister making an overall announcement of the full allocation of over 100 million. And I think when that's announced, we'll have all of the departments lined up, and I think that will be a tremendous day for Waterford and for this project.
So you're not worried at all about this? Because, I mean, my fear would be that if something happens, and God forbid something happens, but they'd be able to quote the statement that was issued from the Minister's Department on the 14th of November, stating that no decision had been taken.
Well, first of all, local Oireachtas members don't make decisions on these issues, Marie, so we weren't there to make any decisions. So you could say that's factually correct. The Minister makes decisions, as does the Department. Now, I can only surmise that maybe the Minister and his officials maybe felt that he went too far in terms of the information he gave us yesterday. And there may be some upset from some within Fine Gael locally. That's what I can surmise. But I might be unfair on that. I think that I acknowledge Pádraig Coffey and others have done huge amounts of work on this to make it happen. In fact, when he was Minister, he was the one that zoned the site to allow for this development to proceed in the first place.
Yeah, I think you all have to be fair. I think that's a good point.
Exactly, and I think maybe that's where some of the confusion is coming from, but there shouldn't be any confusion. John Halligan is a government minister. He was on this radio station yesterday making it very clear, and he announced that the train station funding has now been secured. It is part of the overall fund in terms of the Urban Regeneration and Development Fund. That was what was communicated to us. So that's the factual position. And as I always say, Marie, I can only give the people of Waterford the information I'm given by ministers and by officials in a fair way and in an honest way, in a factual way. That's what was given to us. I think what the Minister is saying, and I want to be fair to him because I think this is a big move by him to unblock what was a difficulty for us in terms of this project, that he will want to announce the overall funding for all of the projects. And you have to bear in mind as well, there are funding applications in from local authorities in Cork, in Galway, in Limerick and Dublin for other projects. He is going to announce the overall funding for each and every project over the next number of weeks or maybe months. And that's a matter for him entirely. And he will do that in his own time in terms of the sequencing when the local authority will get the funding, because Waterford's application will be a multi-annual budget. But I'm categorical and absolutely clear that the issue of funding the train station was resolved yesterday. That's my view, it's John Halligan's view, and it's Mary Butler's view. And I think that's a good move forward and a massive step forward for the project. And I think we should welcome that as we have done. Commend everybody involved, including the Minister, the government and local government representatives, but also the opposition, because again on this issue, as I said earlier, several meetings between all Oireachtas members, meeting with different government departments, meeting with officials, meeting with ministers, to try and unblock what were challenges and roadblocks that were put in the way of this project. And we're getting there. We're nearly at a point now where we'll have the big announcement of the overall funding. And that's what we all want to see. And let's get this project started as quickly as possible, because the developers will be hopefully launching their planning application in the next number of weeks. And can I also say, I also know as well, Marie, that I saw some of the commentary yesterday on social media. People are saying that it's all very well and grand to have the North Quays development. What about the hospital? What about 24/7 cardiology? Of course, they're important issues as well. And we'll bring the same level of intensity that we bring to all of these issues, to those issues. But we have to deal with each issue in its own merit. And, it isn't the Minister for Health that will give the funding for the North Quays. It's the Minister for Local Government. So you deal with each issue on its merits with its line department. And we shouldn't be competing every issue against each other. Every scrap of investment that we can get into Waterford, we need to welcome and we need to see as a huge advance. But all those other issues on those health issues are as important, if not more important, absolutely. But the North Quays, in my view, and the development of the North Quays is huge in terms of how it will transform Waterford City. And I think any advance that comes should be welcomed, and I have no difficulty in heaping praise on any government minister or government department that does the right thing by Waterford. And I think on this occasion, this is a big step forward.
Do we have any idea now of a time frame going forward then? Even vague clue?
Well, my understanding is, and again, it's up to the Minister to formally communicate this in his own time. I assume that he will. He'll make the overall announcement. The Urban Regeneration and Development Fund, it has hundreds of millions of euro in the pot. And this is a big fund that's open to each local authority. So this is a multi-annual budget fund, and Waterford's application is the only application that's what's called a rolling application, so we don't have to apply every year. There are some local authorities that will be looking for one-off funding in 1 year for a project, but Waterford's is more complicated. In fact, it's the biggest project and will probably receive the biggest allocation of funding. So I can understand it is more complicated. But where we are in terms of process is, a number of weeks ago, the Minister opened up the funding again to new local authorities for new projects for this year, and that they're all being assessed at the moment. And then once he has all the applications in, he has to make a decision how much each of those projects get. And I would imagine what the Minister's statement yesterday is saying is that, well, I had a meeting with local Oireachtas members, and we talked about the Waterford issues. The overall allocation of funding for each and every project will be decided by the Minister and will be announced by the Minister in his own time. And that's absolutely right. And let's hope that will happen as soon as possible, because I know from talking to the developers, they want certainty. And they want to know when this is going to happen, when the funding is going to come. And I think they are comforted by what they're getting from the local authority. And the final point that I make on this, Marie, because I think it's an important point to make, the local councillors and the local council have been driving this project for a long time. And the CEO of the council, as well as the local councillors, have been pushing this and have been working massively behind the scenes to make sure that the funding has been provided. And it's huge in terms of the complexity of it, and the challenges to get all of those departments and join up government on this is a big challenge. We're not fully there yet, because we still have to figure out what elements of the project the Department of Transport will fund. But I think the issue of the train station was a serious bone of contention where there was a lot of uncertainty around it. It's my clear contention that uncertainty is now gone.
Okay.
And hopefully in the next number of weeks we'll have a formal announcement that will give us all the comfort that we need.
David, thanks a million for talking to me this morning.
Margaret.
See you, bye-bye. That's Sinn Féin's David Cullinan there. I'll be getting the thoughts of somebody else after the break, because we've more things to discuss on the programme. But let's have your thoughts on it. What did you think of what David had to say? 083 3333 975, or you can call 051 846 123 and get involved in the programme that way. And I also, by the way, want to know your thoughts on what's your man's name, the Healy-Rae fella, Danny Healy-Rae's thoughts on having a permit to allow you to drink and drive. What's your thoughts of that? If you're living in a rural area and you think, I can have 2 pints, doesn't do me any harm, and I'd like a permit to be able to allow me to drive on dark back roads, so I can get to the pub and continue my life, because other than that, rural Ireland is dying. What do you think of Danny Healy-Rae's thoughts of drink drive permits? 083 3333 975 051 846 123. Back after these. You are welcome back to the programme. This texter says, get the station in Mullinavat open and save people from there driving into the North Quays. And Councillor Joe Kelly's been in touch to say, Maria, what David is saying is hopeful, but no more than that from past experience, 24/7 as an example. Excuse me, I'm joined in studio now by Fianna Fáil councillor Eamon Quinlan. You came in to talk about something else, and you're very welcome. But I just want to ask you, first of all, what's your reaction to what we've been hearing both yesterday and today?
In relation to the announcement of the funding for the train station, it was an odd one. I suppose we in the council are as much in the dark as anybody. Last night we had our actual monthly council meeting, so this came up. It was actually raised by the Sinn Féin councillors who said, what's actually happening? And we were like, well, aren't you supposed to know? They asked our chief executive, had we received any official confirmation from the department that this money had been awarded? The response from our county manager was simply that while he and we remain hopeful that the funds will be forthcoming, which has been our position for some time. No, we have not been officially informed by the Minister or the Department or any department official that the money has been granted. So in effect, Waterford Council, who is the recipient essentially of this money, as of 10:20 this morning, we are taking it that the money has not been awarded. There's obviously now it's been moving around. It was supposed to, I think, initially it was supposed to be Shane Ross in the Department of Transport because it was a bridge and it was a train station. Now, obviously, it's moved over to the Department of Local Government. John Halligan was on WLR this morning commenting that he's now talking to Pascal in the Department of Finance. So I'm like, God, this is bouncing all over the place. And I suppose it struck us as kind of strange because after the initial enthusiasm of this is great, once it became somewhat frayed and the department refused to confirm that they had granted the money. Obviously things like, well, if it was a Fine Gael minister announcing an incredible investment into Waterford, surely they would have routed that through Senator Paddy Coffey, their colleague who's been aligned to this project from the earliest days. That didn't happen. I'm not sure, what's going on. So essentially what they're just saying is they remain confident that the money will be coming forward. That's been the line Waterford's been getting fed for a couple of years now. But as it stands, apparently as far as the Department of Local Government is concerned, apparently as far as Waterford City and County Council is concerned, no, there hasn't been a guarantee by
an awful lot of eggs going into one basket here, isn't there?
Well, I mean, there's no hidden secret that the train station issue is probably the issue that's holding up the North Quays. There's private investment there worth hundreds of millions. Waterford Council is putting in investment. You have a situation where the train station doesn't move. It obviously compromised the agreed development. From CIE's point of view, would they agree to spend 40 million of their own money to move a train station 40 yards down a quay, 200 yards down a quay? No, therefore the government has to step in and pay for it. It's an odd one though, I must say, because we had this assessed, I think it's been 2 or 3 years now at this point, it's been going on for so long. I think
That's
it was PwC.
It's kind of put a stall on a lot of things.
We had this assessed by independent accountancy firms that said the government would get €2 back in taxes for every €1 that they put into this project through people coming off the social welfare, getting jobs, spending in the area. You have to imagine that if we were a Cork, a Limerick, a Galway or a Dublin and you came forward with a money-making project like this, they would have financed it and given the commitments from absolutely day one.
OK, now you're in to talk about something else entirely.
Yeah.
That just happened to be Evictor-in-Chief. The council called out as Evictor-in-Chief at council meeting. Do you want to fill us in there?
Yeah, so this may come as something of a surprise to your listeners. So last night...
I don't get this now, so you can explain it and see, am I just taking it up wrong? Because it's not making sense to me.
Sure. So last night at our monthly council meeting for the whole city and county, we had all the directors there, the management there. I simply raised that in the last few weeks, I was inquiring, had there been a policy change in the housing department for Waterford City and County Council? Because in the last number of weeks, what has been happening is for low-income earners that are finding it hard to acquire other social housing because we haven't got enough houses, or to go out and rent on the current rental market privately because the rents have gone so high, we run this thing called the HAP, Housing Assistance Payment, where we simply top them up so they can compete in the private market. That's there. There's literally thousands of people across this county that are availing of that in order to pay for their accommodation. We as a council will go in, once they're in there, within 6 months and carry out an inspection to make sure that the property is up to standard, it meets code, they're not living in squalor. We have had issues that a lot of properties have been substandard that are being let to people. We then obviously serve notice on the landlord that they have to bring it up to code. We give them the specifics. If they don't in the past, we've threatened, legal proceedings against them, things like that. That was the status quo for a long time. But over the last couple of weeks, I've started being contacted by families across the city and the county who have said, well, we had an inspection done. Waterford Council was unhappy with the property, but instead of getting on to the landlord, we've got a letter from Waterford City and County Council to say, because your apartment, your house, no longer meets our standards, we've cut off the housing assistance payment, and we've cut it off a couple of weeks ago before this letter was even sent out. Hence, we haven't been paying your landlord for the last week or two. You're now in effect squatting, and the families are scrambling to go, oh my God, they can't get it reinstated. They're trying to then go on to daft.ie at the blink of an eye, trying to find a property to move into within 7 days, 14 days, because now they have to get out of the property because they've no longer been paying rent for the last bit of a while without them even knowing. So I raised this and I said, is this actually happening, or has this just been a major oversight by Waterford Council? So the response I got from management in specifically our housing department was, yeah, this is going on. This has been going on for the last little while, and that we offer, apparently, Waterford Council a HAP placement finder through our homeless services, our homeless offices on Parnell Street, where you come in and you say, I'm either homeless or my family's about to be made homeless in a week or two. They will go, okay, we will attempt to use your HAP and go on the private rental market and see if we can acquire a private rented property for you. So my point was, this is simply unconscionable. This is downright evil. There's families that are in properties that, yes, they've got issues. They're damp, they're substandard. There's reasons for it to be fixed. Landlords are taking, obviously, taxpayers' money through the HAP for it. We should be clamping down on landlords that are essentially offering substandard accommodation into the system by forcing them to bring it up to code. Yeah. What we shouldn't be doing is taking the roof and four walls away from families with zero alternative. And that was my point. I said, if you identify that these houses are substandard, instead of issuing an eviction notice, cutting off their HAP and forcing them out, bring in your place finder, your HAP.
Can you just cut it off without having the courtesy to tell them that that's what you intend to do and giving them a chance?
The ones that I've seen specifically, whereas by the time the families got the letter from Waterford Council to say we're cutting it off, it had already been cut off for over a week. So the landlord, of course, then was like, well, I haven't been paid for the last week. I'm not getting paid for here on. Hence, get out of my house. I'm going to just let it out to someone else instead. I'll go back to the private market. And there's such a scrum.
And can they not go, I'm sorry, those people are staying there. You're not getting the HAP until the work is done.
That's the policy that we understood has been going on for the last number of years since HAP came in around 2014. This is a major, major change in how Waterford Council, specifically the Housing Department, is doing its business. They never brought it to the councils. They never sought approval from the councillors. We were quite frankly disgusted. We were like, did you not think we would find out about this? People are obviously going to pick up the phone to us when they start getting these letters. I was followed in by councillors, Conor McGuinness, Sinn Féin Dungarvan, Councillor Jason Murphy, City South, other councillors that were like, oh my God, we've been trying to tackle the HAP and we're trying to bring in more properties and we're trying to sort out these substandard issues, and yet apparently the rug's just been pulled out from under us, and literally hundreds if not thousands of families across Waterford City and County. While it's been going on for the last, I would say, couple of months, letters have been going out to families, they're now feeding them up to me. This cannot continue because, again, our homeless services on Parnell Street, the HAP placement, they're already, up to their neck in dealing with people that are sleeping rough, families that are genuinely going to be made homeless because the landlord has said, look, I have to sell the house, I have to pay off a loan with the bank, you have to actually get out. Why would you overwhelm a service like that by then essentially opting optionally to evict all these extra families? And they're making their way through. What we're going to have now is people who are living in substandard accommodation won't want Waterford Council to do an inspection, a review of the property, because they'll be afraid that it'll be found to be below standard. And instead of going after the landlord to bring it up to code, they'll lose that property. So what you're going to have going forward is a large number of people will simply keep their head down. Them, their spouses, their kids will continue to live in substandard, cold, damp, horrendous accommodation. So when I brought it up last night, I thought normally, what it being politics, when you raise it, you kind of get a yes minister type answer. When I was like, are we actually doing this? And they say, well, regulation this and legislation that, and we're doing our best. They were just like, yeah, we're doing it. And, if they're going to be made homeless, then, we have some services that they can avail of, homeless services, to try and acquire property. And of course, as many of your listeners will know, and it's been discussed on this programme many times, if you can't find anywhere within time, within D-Day, when you have to get out of the house, then you're talking Oasis House, you're talking hostels, you're talking B&Bs. And I'm like, why would we, Waterford Council, and this is why I use the phrase evictor in chief, our responsibility is to house and to accommodate as many people as we possibly can who need our services. We have an issue where landlords have been evicting people for fairly simplistic reasons, whether it be, to pay off loans here, or perhaps there's a suggestion that they're trying to get them out to bring in another family that can pay more. Us essentially cutting off a payment that someone's entitled to because we find the accommodation to be substandard without putting in an alternative.
Because nobody goes into a property and says, this is too nice, lads, will you make it a bit flat for me?
Exactly. And what we have often is that oftentimes relationships sour between landlords, the council and the tenants because we're servicing them with notice that they have to put money into the property to do it up. But there's all schemes out there that we run, like the repair and lease scheme, where we'll actually give them the money to do up properties and then they let it to people on our social housing list or they rent it to people on the HAP. And, there's many positive, viable options out there to square the circle, as they say, with both tenants, the council and landlords. But this policy adoption by Waterford City and County Council is horrific. It's going to overwhelm our homeless services. It's unconscionable. There's going to be people who won't want to deal with Waterford Council because of this, because they'll try and protect the current living situation until they can find an alternative in a reasonable space of time. I basically put down that it's my intention to put down a motion for our next meeting to try and force the council to reverse this policy. However, I imagine that we, the councillors and the executive, would butt heads on this. They'll try and pretend that they're availing of national legislation that we can't supersede. I could see a tremendous falling out here between both councillors and the executive. But if that's what has to happen to get this stopped ASAP, it's going to have to happen.
And do landlords like dealing with the HAP scheme or not?
By and large, and I obviously am dealing in generalisations here, no, not really. We have a huge number of landlords. The number of landlords participating in the HAP scheme has been reducing. Now they're constantly bringing in new landlords, but we've got a lot of long-term landlords that have been opting out of HAP. They don't like it. See, the problem is that, say you've got a spouse and some kids, you could be getting maybe €600-700 in HAP on top of what you can put to it to acquire a property in Waterford. You then obviously have to pay a certain small amount of money, as if you were a social...
It kind of just seems to me to be a licence to put rents up in some instances.
There has been a lot of commentary that essentially if you're out and you're working, you're making, say, you and your spouse, you're each making 20,000 a piece, you're making 40,000 as a couple, you will not qualify for social housing, therefore you will not qualify for the HAP. People making far less than you, because we top them up, essentially puts them on the same level as you in the rental game. So what we have is we've got this massive squeeze at the bottom of the housing market, where essentially you've levelled the playing field of all people. There's just simply not enough houses. So of course that's acting in driving up the rents higher and higher. And we saw that when I think it was 2016, when the HAP limits went up by €50, €100 per couple or like that. The rents in Waterford City, Waterford County, likewise started going up just to accommodate that, because they knew that money was there. Until you address the supply issue, until you actually build more houses or regenerate more dilapidated houses and bring in the supply, you can up your rents till the cows come home. It's not going to address, because you can't up a rent you can't up a rent for two families to resolve an issue where there's only one house vacant or available. Simple as that.
Have a listen to this. This texter says, we are on HAP. We only moved into a new house. Our contract started on the 12th and runs from the 12th to the 12th of each month. HAP pays from the 1st to the last day of each month. So because of the contract starting on the 12th, we've been given a letter from the landlord saying we owe the balance for the 12 days, which is 310. So after paying our deposit and first month's rent and doing absolutely nothing wrong, we now owe another €300. Is this fit for purpose at all?
No, it's not. And it will shock people when I say this, that each county council runs a HAP programme, but all HAPs are actually processed in Limerick. So when people are like that texter there who are getting that processed, it's not actually within your local county council or city council's ability to make an adjustment or an amendment here. It's all done in Limerick, and if people fail to pay in their few bob towards it, they actually cut off the HAP as well. It's an incredibly unfit for purpose situation. I understand where they were coming from in 2014 when they brought it in. We tried it, we tested it, there's glaring holes in it. It's not solving the situation. As a plaster on the situation, it's beginning to peel off quite substantially. It needs to be thrown out, and what we need is essentially a house building programme or a house regeneration programme. Because as I've said on this show numerous times, what's the point in going out to our urban edges, building more estates, then trying to chase after them by putting in bus services, shops, basic education services. When you've got Waterford City Centre, when you've got the Main Street in Tramore, when you've got parts of Dungarvan that have been hollowed out, there's been a suburbanisation. We, the council, need to acquire those properties. We can get funding from the Department of Housing to do them up and put people living back in our urban centres.
There's not a housing crisis in this country. There's an incompetence crisis. There's plenty of properties available, and if they were on the market, we wouldn't have half the problems that we have. Eamon, thanks very much for coming in. That's Eamon Finnefall Councillor Eamon Quinlan there. Let's have your thoughts on what he has to say. 083 3333 975. A lot of you exercised about Danny Healy-Rae and his drink driving permit as well, and I'll come to all of those when we come back after these. You are welcome back to the programme. This texter is Paul, says, well, we all know the Healy-Raes are on a different planet. Just for argument's sake, say they got the permit and someone died over the first weekend in a rural area through a drunk driver. They would have blood on their hands. Would they take full responsibility? Absolutely not. Utter nonsense. Maria, what a muppet. What about all the people who are isolated from a family member who got killed by a drink driver, who will have an empty seat at the Christmas table? What kind of people vote for him? Read the drink driving permit suggestion. Firstly, I like a pint now and then, but if you drink and drive, if you drink, don't drive. End of story. Ask Danny Healy-Rae to go to any of the hospitals and observe the effects of drink driving, says Richie. Plenty of them coming in. Keep them coming on 083 3333 975 or 051 846 123. Now, I said at the top of the programme that sometimes it is possible that revenue will owe you money. And to tell us how we can possibly find this out, I have Brendan Tuig, a tax partner with MK Brazel in studio with me, and you're very welcome. Thanks very much for coming in on a weekday. I'm good, thanks. I think, and I've said this to you before, that I think a lot of people are frightened to contact revenue because they're going to leave well enough alone. They're not coming after me. I'm not getting the envelopes with the harp on them, so I'm just not going to say anything. But they're nice people, and they could, well, they have potential to be nice people, and it is just possible that you can have money coming to you.
Yeah, but the main thing is, it's like every problem in life. Hiding from it doesn't make it go away. It just kicks it down the road when it potentially becomes a bigger problem. So if your worst case scenario is, if you do contact them, it turns out you owe them money, it's like pulling a plaster. So your worst case scenario is still not a bad scenario. It has to be dealt with, and you're better off getting in front of it and dealing with it. You know, so but like the key thing you have to embrace with this is that it's your responsibility to make sure your taxes are correct. And because so many people are afraid that they're underpaying, they're probably happy to accept the risk that they're overpaying. And it makes no sense. You know, but then again, it's a fear-based decision. But
I think an awful lot of us don't really understand it.
But that's fair enough, right? Like, I don't understand how water comes up my tap. Do you understand? But I'm not afraid of ringing the plumber to get him to look at it. So, like, no one's expecting you to become a tax expert overnight. But the basics are fairly simple. You know, you check what you're entitled to, you make sure it's there, and you check it every year. And everyone knows someone. You know, you don't have to go to the revenue commissioners. Everyone has a cousin or a niece or an aunt or a neighbour or a brother or someone who's an accountant or a bookkeeper. And it's not rocket science to have at least a preliminary review of it.
So there are things we could be claiming back for that people maybe don't know about as well, isn't there?
See, the vast majority of people, unfortunately, start work, apply for what used to be called tax-free allowances. I still have clients who call them tax-free allowances. They've been tax credits for about 20 years, right? And never look at them again. And things change. And there is a little bit of once bitten, twice shy. What happened was, during the good years, there were a lot more credits, and then when the tightening of the belts came in, a lot of credits were taken off people, or a lot of things changed. So a lot of times, this generation of people, the first time they embraced their taxes would have been having underpayments. But that was the exception. You know, so like the most common one by a country mile would have been medical expenses. Right, that's the most common. People incur medical costs. They're allowed to claim back the taxes on not all of them, but most of them. Prescriptions and doctors, certainly, which would be the bulk of them. And the thing I often hear from people is, sure, I only had a few trips to the doctor. And I go, it's a piece of paper. If you have a receipt from a doctor for €50, that's a tenner. Right? That's all it is. And if I went into your wallet and took a tenner out of it, you'd batter me. Do you know what I mean? So it's not that small amount of money. So that's by a country mile the most common one, and it's also it's very easy to deal with now through the Revenue's online My Account system. To be fair to the revenue commissioners and to the state in general, they have made everything so simple now for those who are anywhere IT literate. And again, if you're not IT literate, you have someone who's IT literate. I mean, you don't need Bill Gates here. You know, it's a very simple portal. You register for it. You go in, you check everything, and you don't even have to pick up the phone. You can do it on your phone.
And do they say if you put some receipts, you gave them some receipts or something? Will they ever say to you? They don't think if it's a wrong kind of receipt that you're trying to do them. They just discount it. Is that what they're not thinking? Like, you're trying to screw the system here.
No, that's exactly, because they're well aware of the fact that most people aren't 100% sure what they're doing. Right, and it's gone beyond. It's on a new level now. We have a thing called receipt tracker and things. You just scan them up on your phone and they'll check them for you and so forth. But if you just embrace the idea that, look, every year around Christmas time, have a look at stuff, right, and it takes all of 10 minutes. It takes 10 minutes, and if it turns out that you're underpaying, you fix it, and that's it. If you refund, you get it. But if you do nothing and you're underpaying, then someday down the road you're going to get a knock on the door, and what had been a 12-month problem is now a 4-year problem, and it's what had been a couple of £100 is now £1,000. Do you know what I mean? So to me, it's win-win if you embrace it.
Okay, but just deal with it, really.
100% deal with it. Take responsibility for it, and as I said, we have leaflets, Revenue has leaflets. 10 minutes of reading will answer 90% of your questions.
Okay. Thanks as always, Brendan. That's Brendan Tuig there, of Tax Partner with MK Brazel. Thanks very much for joining me in studio. I'll be back with more for you after these. You are welcome back to the programme. It's Maria in for Damien, and I have another guest in studio with me now. It's Dr. Nick McCarthy, who's a lecturer in forestry at WIT, and he's in studio now. You're very welcome to the programme, Nick. People get really emotional about trees, don't they?
Yes. I suppose in the last while there's a lot of emotion being stirred up over plantation forestry in Ireland. People don't really like this conifer forestry. They want more native trees. And I suppose I'm kind of trying to advocate that a tree is a tree is a tree. The whole idea behind climate change is that trees are going to help us mitigate against it. But we probably are going to have to look to our exotic species, our conifer species, rather than our native species, because we don't have a huge amount of that.
And why don't we have a huge amount? Is what happened?
The native flora of trees in Ireland is very small. You're probably talking about maybe 10, 15 trees, and of those trees, there's probably only a few of them that will be what we would call multifunctional, so that will produce timber from them, that we can get them to take in carbon, give out oxygen, and grow really well. Like, for example, the likes of oak. Oak will grow anywhere. But in order for us to grow oak very well, we need it on a very good site. And those good sites, I'm afraid, are under dairy and beef. And we will find it very difficult to get those sites. So we have to kind of suit our tree. The right tree in the right place is what we advocate in forestry. So we need to suit our trees to the site that we get. And most of the sites that we've got in the last while and will get in the future will be poor.
I've heard people say that, and you know, as I said to you at the start, people get really emotional about trees, and when they hear the trees are going to be cut down, and everybody thinks trees are getting cut down for 5G, and it's all a conspiracy, and we're all going to die. But sometimes it's time for a tree to go, isn't it?
It's I mean, I wouldn't advocate about cutting down any trees. Like, if you've got nice ones in your garden or in estates and all that, I think they're very important. We even have studies shown in areas in the UK where trees have been shown to sweep up kind of particles and dust in the air, and that problems with respiratory problems and things like that have reduced in areas where there's trees. But the big problem, I suppose, is that people see us cutting down trees, but they don't realise that if they just look around them, there's timber everywhere you look, and it's renewable. It's not like something that we're cutting down. It's not like coal or oil that's going to disappear. But every time we cut down a tree in the forest, we plant more. You know, and people will complain they don't like conifers, but the problem is, if I told people to go home and get rid of every stick of timber that they had in their house, they would be living in nothing. I mean, the trussing in the roofs, the kitchens, the flooring, it's all timber. But the good thing about it, it's renewable. We can continue to grow it and grow it and grow it.
If people have a plot of land, can they apply to just, well, we can stick a few trees in there?
Absolutely,
and does that
yeah.
work?
If they have a plot of land, they can go and apply to the Forest Service, and they can see how much. Now, generally, you're talking about there'd be a minimum size. But that said, they look at anything. And the idea then is that if it's fairly good land, it's not like forestry will come in and say, OK, you have to put conifers on it. If we arrive at a site and we decide it's a good site, we will then decide, OK, you can put oak on it. The thing about it is you'll get a lot of money. More money for putting oak or beech or something on it than you would for putting a conifer on it. The only thing I'll talk about it is that where I'm coming from with a tree is a tree is a tree, is that in order to mitigate against climate change, we need trees that are going to grow very quickly, because trees and wood is made of carbon. And in order to lock in that carbon, we need trees that will grow quickly. And for example, I brought two things here. I know people can't see it, but if we take oak, a 30-year-old oak tree would be only the size, I would probably classify it as the size of a 7-Up bottle. Yeah. The circumference of it, or the diameter of it, would be a 7-Up bottle. That's as much as an oak tree will grow in about 30 years. So it's only locking in that amount of carbon. Whereas
a mighty oak is a very old thing indeed.
A mighty oak, but that's why you have mighty oaks growing to 250, 300 years. Yeah. Then they get big. Okay, but it takes them 200 or 300 years. Whereas this here, which is probably about the size of a basin, of a big basin that you'd have in your kitchen, this is Sitka spruce. Now again, I'm not advocating Sitka spruce because I think we have to change, we have to diversify, but Sitka spruce grows very well in Ireland, and that's in 30 years.
Wow.
So that's locking in carbon. So what I'm talking about is that if we need to mitigate against climate change, we need to use and take up as much carbon as possible. So it's one or the other. What I'm advocating is we probably need to look to more exotics.
And as you say, a tree is a tree is a tree. Just before I let you go, someone's just texted this in, and I kind of touched on this when we were chatting before we came on air. Is it my imagination, or can I feel a heartbeat when I hug the big trees in the wood? I love doing this.
Well, look, I suppose it's everybody to their own taste. I'm not so sure. People talk about tree huggers, but I did say to you before we came on air that there is this thing at the moment that they're seeing is forest bathing. And forest bathing is to do with people going in and enjoying just walking in among trees, and it doesn't matter what type of trees it is. But they've done studies on it. They've walked people in cities and they've walked people in forest, and they've found that between one and the other, people's heart rates increase. There just is these nice feelings, etc., from walking in forestry rather than in cities themselves.
So you must be a great happy fellow altogether, because that's what you do for a living, really, isn't it?
Well, it is.
You're not lecturing about it.
I suppose in one sense, like when I look at it, in my lifetime I've probably planted about 70,000 trees.
Wow.
We've educated in WIT, we've educated about 200 foresters. Foresters aren't doing anything wrong. In fact, foresters are doing a lot more for the environment than a lot of other people out there who are driving their gas guzzlers, etc. We're planting trees. It doesn't matter what tree it is, but we're locking in the carbon. We're doing something for the environment.
Nick, thanks very much. That's Dr. Nick McCarthy there, lecturer, WIT forestry lecturer, and that is bringing the first hour to a close.